right, we are live. Surprise! Brittany's here. Brittany, Kim, and I are doing all-day meeting to plan out all of our great educational content for the year and work on a weekend course, actually, that's coming up, which is super fun. And so we get to join this live together. And today we are talking all about ataxia and some of the latest and greatest updates that Chelsea and Ari, two of our therapists, shared just yesterday, last night at our ataxia course, which was phenomenal, by the way. It was really good.
Really good.
Like really inspiring, and very much like as they were talking, people were like, whoa, my mind just got blown. Like at the very beginning and all throughout it, the course was actually called Ataxia Innovation, and I really felt like it was innovation, like things that you wouldn't typically think about at all with ataxia. So kind of coming off a high from that today. And I want to hit on three big pieces that we learned just last night. And one of them is ataxia in the autonomic nervous system. Talk a little bit about some of the newer understanding of the cerebellum and motor control. So get a little anatomy in there. And there were some really great treatment ideas. So we're going to share some of those today too. So let's start with the autonomic. And actually, this will probably go into treatment ideas too, because this was really, really fascinating. So there were a couple of articles that Chelsea brought up and shared with us that was really, I think, new. That was new to you, right? That was new to me, but looking at the autonomic as a contributor and also as a piece that might help with differential diagnosis in cerebellar ataxia. So looking at autonomic dysfunction, particularly in blood pressure, as a possible predictor of MSA, multiple systems atrophy, which has cerebellar signs. It's a type of Parkinsonism. And she found a really cool scale. It's available on the Movement Disorders website, but it is a rating scale for MSA. And that was brand new, I think, for literally everybody in the course last night. So we learned a lot, but MSA as a Parkinsonism has cerebellar signs and a lot of autonomic dysfunction. So it was a nice way to measure that autonomic piece. And they recommended a few key measures of autonomic activity or autonomic dysfunction. One of them was a particular graded kind of exposure to gravity. So taking vital signs with 10 minutes of rest, 10 minutes at 60 degrees head up, 5 minutes of active standing, and then doing it with deep breathing and a Valsalva, and doing recording at all of those levels. And I know we've been incorporating a lot more testing of the autonomic ourselves, and I just like that particular progression. Have you done anything like that?
Not specifically in ataxia,
Okay.
but like the active stand test for POTS I've done, and that's so easy and so helpful to help identify people with POTS if they haven't already been identified.
Yeah. And we might see an overlap with those, especially with like some of the functional ataxias. We might see an overlap with POTS. So yeah, so that's a really, really great one. And I don't have it on me because I think we're using it out in the clinic. But Chelsea also mentioned, because we've been trying this out a lot, is a little heart rate variability biofeedback device. It's called the Leaf. And I'm doing this because it's kind of shaped like this, kind of like a leaf, and it's a portable EKG. And you put it on a person. I've been wearing mine for a couple months, and then we've been using it in the clinic. Chelsea shared this great story last night. She's been working with somebody for since she started here, so for a long time, several years, who has ataxia. She put on the monitor, so it monitors heart rate and heart rate variability at the same time. And if it sees that your heart rate variability is dropping, it takes you through a breath exercise. It's a resonant breath based on your heart rate. So typically a little longer exhale, but it's very person specific. So it took him through that, and his ataxia went away.
Cool.
It was so cool. So just thinking about that overlap of the autonomic with ataxia and the contribution. And I know we talk about autonomic a lot here, but that was a really really profound way to see it. And I was here, so I helped her set it up, and so it was really pretty neat to see. So I think the take home there is test autonomic if you have somebody with cerebellar ataxia, and then incorporate it into treatment and see how they respond. I have never done more autonomic training in my life. It's like everybody gets autonomic. So that was one take home message. The second area that we couldn't ignore in the cerebellum is motor learning, right? I mean, this is like a motor learning center. And one of the really great things that Chelsea shared, which is actually from our great friend and colleague, Mike Studer, was how we can unmask some automatic movement in a person with cerebellar disorder and ataxia when they have damage in these motor learning centers. And so he actually is a big advocate of dual task. And this is, again, another area. So another nugget for you, it would be to test that dual task. And what Chelsea and Ari showed actually was that for some people, they actually got better with dual tasking. And have you seen this as well?
I've tried it before because I have a patient who gets she has ataxia and she also has dizziness. She had a brainstem stroke, and she, when stress goes up, then her ataxia is worse. And so we've done grounding before. That's been really helpful while standing. But then I thought, well, why don't I add a little cognitive dual tasking just to kind of, I guess, take her kind of focus off the task and like maybe see what she could do motor wise. It was not better. It was worse.
Yeah.
So, but I'm glad I at least got to try it, because if that worked for her, I would have loved to do more of that type of dual tasking.
Right.
Maybe I picked the wrong kind. Like I did kind of a cognitive one. Maybe she would have done better with like a different topic or category or manual or something different.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I think that's a really good point that they mentioned last night too, is like you have to test it out. It's not like dual test for everybody or autonomic for everybody, right? Like you have to test it out. And by the way, they presented a new pie chart. It was great. Love our pie charts, but test it out and then see. And I think you bring up a good point. Like there's different levels of dual task too. Like, are they just singing along, which is like not taking a lot of the executive function component? Because that's another thing that Chelsea hit on, was how much the cerebellum is involved in cognition. So
maybe that's just taxing it more.
Right. Like maybe that was maybe it's too much, which I've definitely seen when I know I start to get stressed out when people are like, name as many words as you can that start with F, and I'm going, like, so, it's
like the F word. I don't know.
When you're going, shoot. Yeah. So that, like, some cognitive tasks might actually increase the stress level. And so you're adding the dual task, but then you're like ramping up the sympathetic response. So like not helpful. But one of the things that Chelsea really described very brilliantly was this idea that some of those automatic movements and procedural memories are still there and still intact in ataxia. And maybe we can unmask them with a dual task or an external focus. And that's kind of taking into account this idea that Mike has shared with us of constraint-based automaticity. So we kind of constrain the task to unlock some of that automatic movement. which I love just the idea of therapy as like a mechanism of like, let's unlock what's there already. We just need to uncover it somehow and provide the right environment and cues and support to get there. And I think that's a big hopeful message in ataxia, is that we can, even in a chronic case, even in a progressive disease. And we saw people, all of the people that we saw in the cases had ataxia for many years. So seeing the changes was pretty remarkable. So we have to share a couple of the great treatment ideas. So I know one that stuck out, I think, to all of us was something that Ari shared.
Yeah, Ari is just really brilliant of like helping her patient understand essentially where he was in space and how to integrate some of that sensory information, which is obviously a big part of what cerebellum does. And so what she did was she had the patient with, I believe, his eyes closed, have to guess whether the table height behind him was higher or lower when he went to stand or to sit. So he was standing, then he had to sit and determine if she had raised or lowered the table. So it was kind of a very practical, functional thing, because that happens a lot in our daily life, is we don't know how high a chair really is, but we accommodate for that. And building that awareness of like how to use your body with that information. That was really cool.
That was really cool. And I think she called it functional proprioception. I think she actually attributed it to Natalie, one of our therapists in our West LA office. But brilliant idea all around. Another version of that, she took the like mat table and put markers on it 6 inches apart and had the person sit at different places and see if they could find those places, again, eyes closed. So really up-regulating all that sensory system and getting feedback. And I also thought that was phenomenal. The last piece that I think is a hallmark in a lot of our courses is the use of the optimal theory. And this kind of goes back to that motor learning idea of, can we unmask some automatic movement with an external focus, with autonomy, with some of those enhanced expectancies. And Chelsea, one of the things that she said, I even like took a screenshot of it because I thought it was like really brilliant, was that, you know, if we're working with someone where some of these like inherent learning mechanisms might be impaired because of the cerebellar lesion, let's use these other parts of motor learning. So let's use the motivation, let's use the external focus that aren't to drive some of the other processes. So that was a big take home for me, that recovery can be possible. We might just need to tap into different resources. So optimal all the way. So that's it. There's some of the neuro nuggets from Ataxia. It gave me a lot of hope, and I got really excited to work with patients next week. We hit on the autonomic piece, the motor learning, and some treatment ideas that I hope you find helpful for your own patients. I wanted to remind you, by the way, we actually hit on this last night too. Our two neurovestibular experts, Catherine and Jamie, are putting on a positive spin on dizziness course for us next month. It's in August. And so you can still sign up for that. We have a couple more spots for taking it live. And you can catch it recorded. It's a 1-day course. And why this connects to ataxia is often if you have one part of your balance system impaired, you actually need to upregulate the other ones, like your otoliths, like your vestibular system. And that is really what they're all about. So taking those kind of complex balance and dizziness, sorting through what the contributors are, and being able to ramp up the systems that are maybe underutilized. So this course would also be really beneficial for ataxia, for stroke, for really anything where the person might have a balance deficit. So I'm really excited for that, to build on that course after our ataxia course too. So that is coming up. I'll put a link in the comments for you, and we hope you have a great Friday. We'll see you next week. Bye.